Hello, everybody. Hi, thank you for joining us today. I'm so excited about this conversation. We are waiting for Dr. Leah Leese to join us right now, and then we will get started. So if you are joining us here live, if you have questions that you want us to kind of talk about, again, we are going to be talking about helping prepare our children for healthy sexuality, with an emphasis on those tween teenage years. And I am very excited. We'll be talking about sex, sexuality, consent, masturbation, and really digging deep into those topics and like how do we approach those with our children. So we will jump in. Of course, if you have like I said, questions that you want to type in, even if you're not able to stay here for the whole conversation, I will share it afterwards later on this week, or to my Instagram feed so that you are able to tune in. So we will, here we go. Let's see. All right, here we go. Okay, let's see if we're able to have her join us. Here we go.
Hi, how are you?
Hello. Good, how are you?
you?
Yeah, likewise. Let me now adjust my camera. There we go, so that I love these. There we go. The Instagram feeds, and then afterwards we have to shift and adjust everywhere.
Yeah. So I'm excited to be
Yeah.
on this live, talk about parenting, and you had some great ideas, so I'm going to let you start. But I'm Dr. Leah Leese. I'm known as a shameless psychiatrist because I'm all about parenting and living without shame. So I'll let you start.
Yeah. And I love your name, because that's one of the things that we had talked about when we were talking about doing this Instagram live, and particularly when we're talking about preparing our children for healthy sexuality, and those topics, you know, masturbation, sex, consent. There can be a lot of shame around that, a lot of shame. And many of us, perhaps, like we grew up with those topics being shameful things.
Yeah.
So, you know, as we get started, I wanted to ask you, like, so for any parents who might be tuning in right now or who might be tuning in later, like, why is this an important topic? Why should we be talking about sexuality, you know, sex, consent, masturbation, with our children? Why would that be important?
Well, talking openly with your children about sex, intimacy, relationships, will help provide the necessary support they need to keep themselves safe, but also to prioritize their pleasure and to gain pleasure around sexuality when they grow up, and to be able to form intimate connections and communications. Only half of adolescents really receive formal education about sexuality and contraception before they have sex. So that's the safety piece. But also, I do believe a lot of the reasons why adolescents get into situations where they experience pain or they get sexually assaulted is because they never really got any help from their parents on how to really discuss their boundaries and develop a really good sense of what they want and what they don't like. And that comes from like parental education. So those are all the reasons why I think it's so, so important to talk to your kids about sex and intimacy and all that stuff.
Yeah, you know, in preparation for this, I was reading some journal articles, and I can't remember the exact journal, but it was something that was published in 2016, which was so fascinating because one of the things that they mentioned was that we, like 80% of teenagers, 15 to 19-year-olds, receive some type of information on like saying no and STDs. But only about half of those same, right, like within that age group, receive any instructions on, you know, like pleasure, birth control, anything like that. So it seems like we have a culture that's like still very geared towards let's prevent, like no, no, no.
Risk, yeah.
Risk, yes, very risk heavy, but we're missing that other component. And then we do get into, right, adults who struggle to know their own bodies, struggle to have those intimate relationships.
Yeah.
You know, but there were never conversations around like, it's okay for like your body is part of you. It's there's no shame around our body. There's no shame around pleasure and these other components that we often don't talk about.
And in my practice, a lot of kids are having sex because they want attention and they feel it's the only way they can gain attention, and they aren't enjoying it and they don't understand their own bodies. And that's why, you know, I made it my mission to really create the conversation around sexuality. And that's why I wrote the book, No Shame, Real Talk with Your Kids about sex, self-confidence, and healthy relationships. I think it's really important to talk about shame, because when we feel shame, we experience shame when we feel we violate the social norms we believe in. So if you've been told you shouldn't have sex before you're married, or you've been told that you should masturbate because it's shameful, then when you do those things, you will feel internalized shame, even if no one specifically tells you to feel shame, but you've internalized that narrative. And then it's really important to unpack that narrative and decide whether or not those ideals meet your values, or as parents, those ideals meet your values. Because even if you're not saying it, somebody else might be. And then your child's internalizing all the shame from not just what you say, but from what all social media and what, you know, TV and all that saying about what a body should look like, or pornography, because a lot of children watch it. And so they create this own personal narrative that never gets challenged.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you know, I think that very briefly, like you brought up pornography, and this past year, so I work a lot with children or adolescents, you know, I have connections with like the school system. And we saw such a huge increase of adolescents and very young children getting access to like pornography. And a lot of times, like, you know, in the conversations, like this is their first exposure to any type of, you know, like any conversations around body, sex, anything like that. And, you know, we could go into a topic at some other time around pornography and things like that. But like, there's a lot of things that children would see in pornography that sets them up for like these very unrealistic expectations, right? Like this is what it's supposed to be or whatnot. And but then these kids are oftentimes like shamed, right? Like, this isn't what you should be doing. But then that's where it stops. Like we just shut it down completely, and then there's no conversation after the fact.
Yes, that's true.
So as parents then, parents, educators, whoever it is that may be tuning in, how can we, so let's say that we did grow up with a lot of shame around these things. What are some of the things that we could do now as adults, right, trying to parent our own children, to try to both address the things that we need and to be able to, you know, almost like create the space between, okay, this is what it was like for me. Maybe there's still aspects in the way that I parent to, let's say, like, I want to discourage my children from, or I want to encourage them to wait, right, to hold off until adulthood, marriage, something like that. But I also want to prepare my child if that's not their decision, you know, like maybe I want to encourage it, but in the end, it's going to be their decision, because it's very hard to control, right, to keep children like from exploring, from doing these things. So
well, with children, it's, you know, young children, it's a benevolent dictatorship. But for older adolescents, you'll be lucky if it's a democracy, meaning like you're lucky if you get any kind of say. But they certainly have as much as say, if not more, than you do over what happens to them. So, you know, the idea that you can control them is just not true. And the more that you attempt to do so and coerce them to, the more they'll just become liars and manipulate to get what they want. Like anyone would if they were trying to be hostily controlled, right? So when it comes to dealing with your own shame, I think it's really important to own your sexual story as an adult. Like, what were the things that went well? What were the things that didn't go well with your sexual story? What do you wish your parents had told you? What do you wish that, other mentors told you? Do you wish you had waited? Do you wish you hadn't waited? What are the sort of pearls of your story that you can own and really take control over to rid yourself of shame? And the opposite of shame is vulnerability. So how can you be vulnerable to your mistakes? And when you really can do that as a parent, it makes it much easier to then pass down intergenerational wisdom and say, okay, this is what I wish I'd known. Let me spin that story and weave a different narrative. As far as what you should be doing with children is this idea that it's a sex talk is a total, it's just not true. It's so many conversations layered over so many years, and each conversation gets more tricky and complex, and they build upon each other, just like math or any other curriculum builds upon the things that went before. So, it's not just one sex talk, it's hundreds of sex talks, layering in biology and body parts and body autonomy and self-esteem, from the start to all the time when they're grown up and they don't really need those talks. And then you can just be their friend. So I think that's my advice, is like deal with your own shame and find the pearls by owning your sexual story. I'm actually going to be doing a webinar on that, how to own your sexual story so you can pass down the right messages. But I also think the other half is to have constant and ongoing sex talks in which you practice them and you're kind of ready for them.
Yes. I love that. I think that it's like, I completely wholeheartely agree. Like, these conversations need to be happening really since like infancy, when we're talking about consent and, just the body anatomy and whatnot. And then I imagine as we're having these conversations, right, like on a frequent basis, whenever it is that our children are like, what's this? Like, what do I have down here? Why does my brother have, what does my brother have? And we address it, we say, that's a penis, or that's a vulva, that's a vagina and whatnot. But then with the shame aspect that you had brought up for us, then, it's like we're, in a sense, like de-shaming those experiences that we had as well by having these frequent conversations with our children, right? It doesn't have to come to when our children are a preteen or a teenager and like, okay, let's sit down and now let's have a sex talk. Yeah. And it's going to be super awkward and weird for both of us because we have never talked about any of this ever before, right? So let's jump in a little bit then into let's take like masturbation. Sure. What, as parents, what can we sort of expect? How do we talk about these with our kids? When do we start to see our children masturbate? And I'm sure for every parent who is tuning in, we know it starts way younger than what we're told, but if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I think the conversation about masturbation really goes into a greater discussion about body autonomy, which is an important part of safety and also a part of pleasure. So, children begin to masturbate as soon as they're pretty much born, especially boys more, but also girls, I mean, both. And any parent who has had a baby infant will see that kind of stuff. And, goes all the way through the line. And when you're discussing body autonomy, it's like, this is my body and I own its domain, and that's the conversation you have. Like, it's your body. You can do whatever you would like with it because what feels good for your body is good. And that's the beginning of conversations of masturbation. But it's also like, okay, when they're very little, you don't say anything, you don't do anything, you just ignore it. But when they're don't even say anything at all. But then when they're a little older, and they have language, you could say things like, that's something you do in private. It's your privates. Your privates are, your penis, your anus, you tell them exactly what privates are, and point so they know. And then you say those things are done when you're private, when you have privacy. If you want privacy, I'll give you privacy. Just go into your room and I promise I'll knock. And that's the conversation about body autonomy. It's your body. But that's a great conversation also about who gets to touch you, right? You can touch yourself anywhere you want, and that feels good. What else feels good? Do you like it when I brush your hair? do you like it when I scratch your back? You can decide whether or not I am allowed to scratch your back. I have to maybe brush your hair, brush your teeth, because that's part of grooming. But you can decide who gets to scratch you, who gets to tickle you. You know, if you don't like it, we won't do it. And that's the conversation around who comes into the area, the private area. And that translates, you know, being able to communicate. I like this touch. I don't like this touch. And that really translates into safety. Like, you know, no strangers get to touch you there, you know, just your doctor. So that's a safety thing, or your parents. But then it's also like, who do I invite into to touch me? And that can start as non-sexualized touch. You know, it could be, you know, who gets to scratch your back, or who, you know, how do you play games? And then it moves to sexualized touch, you know, which is like in the adolescence years. And how do you communicate what you like? This is going to be a waist up date. I only want to kiss, you know, please, you know, this is, I'm very specific about what part of my body you're allowed to touch. And if you're able to communicate that from a very young age, because you've been doing it all along, it'll protect you from those uncomfortable moments and even sexual predatory behavior, because you are now able to communicate about your boundaries.
Yeah, that's great. I absolutely love that. You know, I wrote down a phrase that you said when you were talking, and I feel like that kind of sums it up. You said, like, what feels good for your body is good, or something like that. You know? And that's a great, like, what a phrase to like de-shame just sexuality in general. But yeah, so we are starting those then early, and we're continuing on with those conversations on like what feels good for you, and helping our children then know that what their boundaries are, and their boundaries may look different from so-and-so's boundaries, or from my boundaries, you know, and that kind of helps shape.
I wish that all teenagers could go into dates or situations, romantic situations, already saying, you know, this is going to be a waist up date, or this is only going to be kissing, or just so you know, I'll go out with you, but these are what I'm setting. These are parameters of what's going to happen up front. Because I think it would save, if the person was just into wanting to have sex and that was it, it would probably weed them out, right? But if they really, you know, they would just, it wouldn't become a whole big thing that, you know, everybody was even a you know, let's say it's a male female date, even a lot of males would feel relieved to know that he didn't have to keep pushing the boundaries, because where was he going to get? Like, it could be just take it all off the table and make it more relaxed. I was talking about this with Billy Presido. He calls himself the man whore the other day, and he said, you know, he went on a date, and the girl that he was with said, you know, only kissing it over the clothes. And he said it was this like great date, because they were just kind of rolling around and kissing and having fun. There was no stress or pressure for the date. So it went great, you know? And so I think it's like, it's a great kind of tool to have in your back pocket, and to kind of train kids to be able to communicate that to each other.
Yeah, I imagine what a difference that would make for, you know, our adolescents to be able to communicate that early, because there's so much pressure for teenagers, so much pressure through everything that they see, through peers, through obviously like just dating relationships, to perform in the way that other people are performing, or to do what it is that they've seen, you know, on TV or where it is that they've seen. Okay, so let me see. And by the way, for anybody who's tuning in here, if you have questions, please feel free to add them into the comments section, and I will try to navigate through these.
And just to talk a little more about shame, it's like, you know, there's also shame a lot around your body and what it looks like. And, you know, I had a lot of shame about being 6'2.5" growing up, and, you know, being so, but everyone has shame around their body. Like, I'm amazed by how many kids in my practice experience so much shame around their body image. Everything from Everything from, these are beautiful people, beautiful young people, everything from their, their lips being too big or their acne or their, anything, their breasts or everything is wrong with them. Like I sometimes go down the line from the top of their head to their feet and just like, what do you think of this? What do you think of this?
Yeah.
And when I'm done, I'm like, oh my God, you would think you're a complete troll, like how you describe yourself, and these are beautiful, people. And I feel that, we're shame buckets when it comes to how we look. And I always, tell my teenagers, like, feeling good about your body and having a sense of love of your body is very sexy and will translate into a lot more pleasure. So having all this shame and, oh, I got to hide this, I got to do that. What if he sees this? What if she sees that? Is going to lead to a very, unexciting and unenthusiastic sex life, so I'm like, you got to deal with all that body shame as well and own your body and just love it for its flaws. And so that's another piece that we can help as parents, because we can do things like praise the right traits, praise character, like good sense of humor, praise great fashion sense, never praise like, oh, you look beautiful. Well, you could say you're dressed so beautifully, you're such a cool sense of style, like rather than always focusing on what you look like. And you can also like praise the right people, on Instagram or on, people are doing interesting things rather than just people who look good. And, encourage your kid to do the same, kind of look at themselves, and also to be proud of the things they do rather than saying, hey, I'm proud of you. You can say, you should be proud you got that A. So it's like always trying to get them to see themselves in a positive way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. One of the other things then that I want to add with that is, as we're kind of working with shame with children, and let me give me a second. Incoming call. So is also helping them, explore like what it doesn't, why it is like to maybe like if there's someone who they imagine is like prettier, well, what is it like then, right? To not be the prettiest, or what does that even mean? In addition to obviously like for these like their essence, who they are more so than, like, oh, you have such beautiful long hair, and then we become obsessed, let's say like with our hair or something like that,
Yeah.
But also just exploring a lot of these other aspects of like, what is it like to then not all look the same or to not all fit this standard? I don't know if this might be the right word, but like just, what is it like to like look like not, I don't know, to not look like this ideal that we all have of the standard of beauty or, like the height, and we could go on and on about all these examples that are present with that comes with then owning our own sexuality and body. Let me see.
There's a lot of like, unfair comparisons. You compare yourself to others and always find that you fall short. But really, there's no comparing yourself to others. You should not do that because everybody, there's a lid for every pot. There's always going to be someone who finds your beauty beautiful. I grew up in a town where everyone was, Irish Catholic, very white and very like blue-eyed and looked a certain way, and I didn't fit the mold. So I had a lot of issues with my own self-esteem. And now looking back, it seems so ridiculous because who cares, right? But that's the kind of thing that we have to help our kids see. I was lucky that I had parents that always emphasized that didn't really matter, and that there was always going to be someone who liked liked who I was, and that I just had to get through high school because it was dumb anyway. And they were right.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, let me see. So let me look through some of my other questions. We didn't kind of talk about that. Okay. And then so let's say our child comes, right? Like your teenager, we'll go with teenager, comes to you and like this is obviously the ideal, the ideal consideration, where we have been open and honest about like sexuality in our home from when they were young. And so we've been having a lot of these conversations, and your child comes to you and it's like, hey, mom, dad, like, I think I'm ready to have sex. you know, with my partner. What are some suggestions? And
Sure. I
at that
mean,
point,
hopefully at that point you've layered, because trying to explain to, you know, a teenager about sex is like trying to teach a kid algebra before they know what the numbers and levers are. So hopefully you've
yeah,
been, you know, doing it all along. So there's foundation there. But then if they come, and hopefully you've opened up the door by saying, please come to me when you're ready to have sex. I will, you know, totally be I will totally help you in every way. And, you know, I want to know, it's important. And I'm not going to forbid you to do it, because I think we should, you know, talk about how to make that happen and work. So hopefully all that's been set up. So then after that, they come to you. So, you know, I think at this point I think I might be ready to have sex. You know, that's the time to ask a lot of questions like, okay, what is, you know, how do you define sex? What do you mean? You know, because we don't know, everyone's talking about the same thing.
yeah,
Oral sex, you know, vaginal sex. Maybe your kid is, you know, in a single sex relationship. We're talking about anal sex. Or, you know, even not in a single sex relationship, we're talking about anal sex. So it's really important to know what it is, what's their definition of sex. And then the second thing is, how do you define that you're ready? Like, how do you know? And you know, hopefully they say that, you know, they trust the person, and that they've talked about it, and, you know, that they feel like they're in love, or they really care about one another, or whatever it is. And then it's like, okay, what are your expectations for after? Like, are they supposed to call? Or are you going to be dating? Is this going to be like, do you think this is long term? Do you think this is just, you know, experimentation? Just, you know, clarify their expectations. And then it's like, okay, so now we got to talk about, like, what are the contraceptions you're going to use, and where are you going to have sex? So it's like the logistical issues. And I really believe that the only really safe place for a teenager to have sex is in their home. There's really no other safe place behind the bleachers, you know, in a car. All those things could lead to arrest, or, you know, public shaming. If it's at a friend's house, it could be during drinking. There could be, you know, bad outcomes. Somebody could walk in. They could, you know, I've heard a lot of kids get assaulted in that circumstances, because they're drinking, and then they decide to have sex in somebody's bedroom, and then all the other people walk in, or they're watching, or they'll get involved, and that's not what the intention originally was. So that's not a safe environment. And so you have to discuss how that's going to work. You know, if it's in your home, like, are you going to deliberately leave the house for an hour to give your kids space? Are you going to, is there a basement? Is it up in their room? And what are their parameters, and what time of day, and when, all that stuff. And, you know, of course, make sure there's always plenty of available contraceptives. And, you know, it sounds really scary. Like, oh my God, my kid's gonna have sex in my house. I mean, I literally bought an Airstream for this to put in my yard, for, you know, because I didn't want to hear it, and I thought I would like freak out. So I'm like, I just bought this really cool Airstream with, like, you know, so my kids are teens. I don't have to hear any of that stuff. But they're on my property where they can be, like, secluded and safe. And, you know, even though I'm like, you know, like, this is going to be best for them and me. And I'm actually really looking forward to that part of their journey, and to meet whoever their partner is, and look them in the eye and shake their hands, and, you know, have them become part of our family life. And I think that's going to be exciting and cool, and see how that stage of their life develops. So you really got to go into it with that kind of thought, rather than, oh my God, I never want to meet the person, and oh my God, they've deflowered my child, or something dumb like that. Because the reality is, this is something we want. We want our kid to have a fulfilling sex life. That's what we want. That's great. It's the best part of being an adult. Like, why would we want to deprive them of that? So having ostrich syndrome is not going to really help them, you know, become who they're really meant to be. And they're embarrassed or ashamed to even talk about it with us. Oh my God, how are we going to be there to help them? So I really encourage parents to, like, embrace this. This is the next great adventure. It's so exciting and wonderful. And rather than having ostrich syndrome, just partner with them, and you're going to find, like, God, they'll be like, you get so close, you know. A lot of my parents and teenagers tell me, oh, my kids cuts me out of my life, just completely cut me out. And I'm thinking to myself, duh, why do you think they did that, right? They did that because all you do is lecture them about the risks of everything, you know. You're not really open to them. So yeah, they've shut you out.
Yeah. Wow. That was both wonderful, and, you know, so much. I think so many of us, in just thinking about it, I have young children, so my children are like 5 and under, and thinking about that, you know, I myself, like to think that I'm going to be very open, you know, we have a lot of these conversations already on like what's age appropriate for them right now. But thinking about when they get to that and, you know, like giving them the safe place, like so much for us as parents, for myself even, to begin to work through mentally and try to explore so that I can be that, or continue to be that safe person for them, so that, yeah, we give them both a safe space as they start getting older, you know, and continue to build that relationship with them, to give them the tools that they need, but also, you know, like so that they can come to us as they get, you know, in those adolescent years and even beyond, like, you know, when they're like full adults, and that we can then, it's less so, you know, it's like this collaborative relationship that we can have with our children.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow. That is awesome. All right. So let's see. Let me look back. I know someone was asking some questions about getting support or like individual help. If you are needing individual help, please feel free to look at our bios, and, you know,
yeah, I'm starting a platform on No Shame for parents, and actually for everyone, millennials as well, on Mighty Network. So that's the link in my link tree on my bio. It's going to purely be about the subject of shame and parenting. So check that out as one source. I've already posted a bunch of stuff, and that's where I'm going to post my webinars and really my more community-minded discussions. I'm doing one on owning your sexual story coming up, which I think is going to be really fun for parents, because it's not just about like, what are you going to say to your kids, but how do you own your own stuff? So I'm really excited about that.
That sounds awesome. Yeah. So for sure, you know, I'll end up sharing this one to my store, or to the Instagram feed afterwards, for anybody who might be tuning in at a later time. And I'll tag you, and, you know, for people to be able to check that out. That sounds awesome. All right. Let me see. Okay, I didn't notice any other questions. Okay. All right. So please feel free to check out Dr. Leah Lisa's then bio, her page. Yeah, for those exciting things that she has coming up.
Yeah. And thanks everyone for tuning in and learning more about shame. And yeah, reach out and, you know, join Mighty Networks, and you can ask questions there. I'm going to be answering them on that platform. And I'm really looking forward to engaging more with my audience around these things. I'm really excited about it.
Awesome.
And thank you for hosting me, Cedar.
Yes. It was a pleasure. And thank you, for sharing that information with us. And hopefully, you know, we can have another chat sometime soon.
Yes, thanks a lot.
Have some of those chats around other aspects of shame that, you know, parents.
I'm just about to write.
Adults,
I'm just writing a blog now about the shame of fertility decisions, and how do you really navigate through that? Like, when do you have children, and what does it mean if you don't, or you do, or like freezing your eggs? And I think that's also an area that I see a lot of shame around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Very exciting. Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye. Take care.
Bye.